Welcome, everyone. This is our Intro to Grant Writing Fellowship Edition webinar. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to talk about fellowship applications. If you have just joined us, I've asked the people in the room to share in the chat window what graduate program they're in. For example, EDD, MS in Counseling, MBA, and to also share what their research or study interests are. Fellowships can support a wide variety of things, and the more I know about what things you're interested in, the better able we'll be able to customize the content today according to what your interests are. Since this is the start of a new semester, let me tell you a little bit about the ACU Online Writing Center. We work with students in almost every online program at ACU. I say almost every because we haven't yet picked up one of the divinity programs, but if you're an online student at ACU, you're probably in one of the programs that we support. And we are happy to work with you at any stage of your writing. You could be coming in and you've just got an assignment sheet and you're wondering, what is it actually asking me to do? Can you help me figure out what I'm supposed to be writing up? And that's fine. You could be sending us an outline for comment. You could have a partial or complete draft. You could even have a paper that you've turned in and you're coming back for additional feedback about how to improve it for the next time around. Now, we work with students through several different pathways, including webinars such as this one. We also work with students with writing center appointments, most of which are what we call asynchronous. Asynchronous means not at the same time. For an asynchronous appointment, you'd sign up for an appointment through the WC Online website. That's the upper right-hand corner link. If you sign up for an appointment, all you need to do after that is to upload your draft by the appointment time, and then one of our faculty will come in and look at it and give you feedback. There is no charge for this service. We have it included as a student perk. I did a survey once of peer writing centers around and discovered one writing center that was charging $60 an hour per appointment. And I don't know about you, but I would probably use the writing center a lot less if I was being charged $60 an hour. You can use it for free. You can come and visit us up to twice per week. You can make 2 appointments per week. And if it's not a busy week, meaning there are lots of appointments free day of, you can always write us in and ask, hey, I saw there are a bunch of appointments. Can I get a third one? That's more likely earlier on in the semester and less likely, say, in finals week. So we work with people primarily through asynchronous appointments, and we do phone and Zoom appointments by special request. This is subject to availability. So if you make an appointment the day of and you say, oh, hey, can you meet me in 10 minutes? That's less likely than if you were to ask, say, a week in advance. But the procedure for making the appointment is the same. We just put in the notes in the appointment form saying that you would requesting a real-time appointment, and then you give us some potential availability ranges, we're more likely to be able to schedule you in. We also have a variety of resources on the Writing Center website. That's that link at the bottom, including sample papers, blog posts on certain topics, resources, paper templates, and a few other things. Coming up on our schedule, we have a lot of webinars coming up this term, and we've got a lot of them front-loaded. So if you're new to graduate study at ACU, or in fact, new to studying online at ACU period, I would strongly recommend that you come to our Intro to APA 7th edition in class. We have a variety of series running in between each other. So we have the first installment of our doctoral writing as a nurse series that is kicking off on Sunday. You're welcome to attend if you're in another program. Just know that some of the content is targeted more towards nurses, and that if you're just interested in a general, well, how should I be writing in my program, you're probably more interested in oh, I'm sorry, there's a extra copy and paste in here. You're probably more interested in the Intro to Graduate Writing webinar that is coming up. Give me a moment. I'm going to fix this slide because I think you want to see the correct ones. Just a moment. All right, sorry about that delay. All right, here's the correct schedule. Coming up on Sunday, we have Doctoral Writing as a Nurse, Tips for DNP Students. That's the first in a series of 5 webinars now on different topics and assignments as a nurse. We have our Intro to APA 7th edition. This is a great one, especially if you are a brand new student at ACU or brand new in ACU's online programs and you want to know just what APA 7 is, because all of our online programs are now using APA 7th edition. We have a writing about self-assessments webinar that's coming up on Tuesday right after that. And that looks at a number of things that in actually about half a dozen programs now at ACU, including leadership and counseling. And there are various assignments where you take a personality test or a strengths test and write about it. And we talk about how to do that correctly, especially how to do that under APA 7th edition, which has some particular ways about how you are supposed to be referring to yourself. We also have writing a film analysis. Film analyses are used in, I believe, 5 of our online programs as core assignments, and they're an option in a couple of our undergraduate ones. So if that applies to you, know that we have a couple different offerings of this, focusing on the particular film assignments from different classes. So if you look on our webinar archive, you can find those. And then we have a live edit session. So if you are working on a dissertation or a doctoral project and you'd love to get some extra feedback, the live edit session, students offer their drafts, we anonymize them, talk through them, track changes, talk through how to get around various communication challenges, how to fix formatting, things like that, and you get a track changes copy of your document at the end. So if you're interested in that, one of the options when you register for a webinar is to volunteer for that. And you can also send me an email directly. The archive I mentioned earlier, you can view the complete schedule of upcoming webinars as well as access recordings of all of our past webinars through this link here. Those are available 24/7, but if you would like to receive a copy of the recording or a link to the recording for tonight's lecture and you didn't register, just type your email address in the chat room. If you did register for this webinar, don't worry, you're on the list already and you'll get that. But if you're not sure or you didn't register and would like it, just type your email address and I'll add you to the recipients list, and that goes out later tonight. That said, let's look at the main part of this, which is talking about fellowships. Let's distinguish between 3 general categories of financial awards. Scholarships are financial gifts that do not have to be repaid. There may be eligibility conditions that you need to meet or continue to meet. For example, a scholarship that's only available for sophomore students at ACU, or a scholarship that is only available to school counseling majors. Now, fellowships are very similar to scholarships, but are generally considered more prestigious, often are for larger amounts of money, and usually have a service commitment. Now, the service commitment can be very small. For example, I received one fellowship where the service commitment was, send us a report and tell us how it went. That's great. Sometimes it's something more. So for example, there's a presidential management fellowship where there is a monetary award, but to get that award, you commit to working for the federal government for a 2-year period. That's fine, as so long as you understand that upfront. There are other commitments that may include, for example, giving a conference presentation or publishing an article in a journal. So just keep track of that and make sure that you don't stack up any that, say, would require you to go somewhere that you don't want to actually go or would not be willing to go if they gave you that award. And we'll also talk briefly about grants, which are sums of money given by an organization for a specific purpose. They could be funding research, they could be funding programming, and sometimes they are, in fact, just financial gifts. You'll see that there is some blurriness between the names for these awards, and you might see people refer to them synonymously. We're going to talk mainly about fellowships, which are usually associated with graduate level study and higher. So let's also distinguish between internal versus external fellowships. Internal in this case would mean things that are at ACU and limited to members of the ACU community, and external being the rest of the world. One of the reasons this is of important is that if you're looking for a particular thing and you want to be looking in the right kind of database or the right sort of web page. So for example, these databases that I have here are primarily listing external awards, meaning things that anyone who meets the particular qualifications rather than just people at a particular school will be eligible to apply for, as opposed to going to ACU's Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, which lists, it does link out to some other things, but this particular page is for things that are internal to the ACU community. You may also find some distinction between awards that are available for students at a particular status or who meet certain criteria. For example, there was a women's center at my alma mater that awarded fellowships for female identified students. I was not eligible for that. That was a particular pot of money that had been given by donors for that purpose. And if you know you meet some particular qualification and that you think might have research funding, do some searching around. In fact, especially do some searching for things run by your professional society. More about that a little bit. Let's talk about these two fellowship databases here. So the University of Illinois Fellowship Finder is comparable to the Duke Fellowship database that I linked to earlier. The University of Minnesota, however, has a particular database here that is for people who are looking to do research or study overseas. So if you have a project, or if you are in fact living overseas and wanting to do research overseas, the second one is a great place to start. Now you might wonder why I have all these things from non-ACU institutions here. Well, one of the qualities that make it more likely to have a really good funding database is the level of research output. And if you are on the university job market, you may see things like R1, R2, R3. So these are the Carnegie classifications of research output. Basically looking at a university and saying, well, how much research do they do here? How much do the faculty publish on average? And then dividing that into different categories. So Duke University, for example, is an R1 Carnegie institution, meaning the highest level of output. They have a huge research budget, and thus they have multiple staff members who are keeping that database as current. So while there are some very nice ones that are listed on the ACU webpage, the ACU webpage is for us most valuable for guiding us to what the institution itself has. And if you are looking for opportunities beyond the university, you want to make sure that you are looking at the most things that you can see that you are eligible for. We're going to look at some of these particular tools in a moment. I've also included, in case someone is in one of our other programs and wants to know more about the grant area, if you go to our online webinar page, down in the recordings, you'll see that we have a version of this webinar that's focused on the grants and that talks you through different resources. I believe there are two recordings, one of which is focused on nursing research funding and the other is focused on education. And so if you look in the archives, you can see that particular focus. All right, before we look at some specifics, let's talk about the basic sets of information that you want to have for applying to a fellowship. The first is your curriculum vitae. And if you haven't created one now's a great time to start. Why? Because if you're slowly building it over time, you'll remember things like, oh yes, I got such and such an award or such and such a scholarship before, or I was, for example, on the dean's list, things that you can include on the CV. General rule, put everything you can think of there, and then if you have to cut that down because it only accepts, say, a 2-page CV or a 6-page CV, you can do the cutting later. But it's a lot easier to cut things out than it is to add things in on the fly. As an example, in high school, I was a National Merit Scholar semifinalist. Now, to me, high school is a very long time ago. And if it comes to applying for something and I need a little bit more space, that one's going because, again, high school, a very long time ago. Same thing with a lot of the undergraduate awards. But if they ask for a 6-page CV, I might possibly include that so that we're showing a pattern of excellence or other people believing in the work that I'm doing, that kind of thing. It will depend on the opportunity that you're applying for, which is again why I recommend putting as many things as possible into CV so you have that record handy and you can condense it if need be. Every fellowship application that I've seen requires some sort of narrative. It could be talking about your journey as a scholar, for if it's a study award, or why you want to go to this program, or why you're attending this particular opportunity, or what you propose to do with the funding. For example, in a Fulbright scholar or Fulbright faculty application, you propose the projects that you'll be doing within the framework of the Fulbright program. There will be some sort of application form. These days, it's usually an online form where you put in, your education and your contact information and demographic information, stuff like that. Look at that early so you know if there's anything you need to track down and get it. You will usually need a budget of some sort for the research projects, so start writing that down early. Okay. And 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. Now, I mentioned the Fulbright program. So the Fulbright Scholar program for the Fulbright student program for people who have at least a bachelor's degree or will have one by next fall to be studying abroad, doing some sort of project, could be study, could be research, could be both. That happens to require a language evaluation. Is it a very difficult thing to get? Well, no. I walked into a professor's office and said, hello, I need a language evaluation. I took your class. Would you be willing to write one for me? And we talked in the language for a while, and they filled out the application online, and that was that. It's usually someone who needs to be a teacher, preferably a university teacher of the language. And so that might be something that's easier to accomplish a certain part of the year than in the other. Catching someone when they're on summer vacation, it might be a little bit harder than getting them during the school year. And of course, if you're convenient to a college campus, they may make a big difference versus if you're studying online and it's a bit of a drive to get to one. I will mention, because I believe that most of the people attending today are, our online programs and not immediately adjacent to the Abilene campus, that it does not have to be from your institution, provided it's a qualified language faculty member doing the evaluation. Of these, well, I'm going to skip past this a moment to come back to it. I'm going to say that the letters of recommendation are usually the most difficult thing to get. And when I say the most difficult, I mean getting the writer to produce it on the timeline that you would like. Faculty being faculty are often getting many requests and many emails these days. And often they will want to spend some time to write a really good letter of recommendation for you, which is good. But they're often busy, which may be complicating if it's something you want them to get in less than a month. So the general procedure is to request a letter of recommendation at least 1 month in advance, preferably 3. You don't need to give them all the details, but just so it gets on their calendar, on their timeline. And then you want to provide them with all the materials that they need to write a good letter of recommendation without having to spend too much time on it. For example, if it's been a while since you studied with this person, let them know in writing how you know them. Like, did they supervise such and such a project? What was it called exactly? What did you do? what were the courses that you took with them and when, and how long you've known them. You also want a up-to-date copy of that CV. So again, if you've started on it already, you can just hand it off, and that will give them some things to refer to potentially. And you want to give them several sentences or a bulleted list of things that you would especially like them to mention. For a recent fellowship application that I submitted, I asked that the person, who I knew from professional circles, that they mention a paper of mine that they had seen at a conference. So they could talk about, oh, Dr. Considine has a great presentation style, and he had this interesting paper about this thing. Details that help make it more than a, yeah, blah, 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 please give this person money kind of letter. More on that in a little bit. We're going to come back and look at some specific materials after we look at one of those funding things here. Pausing briefly, I mentioned a couple times our Writing Webinars page. So if you go to the Writing Center homepage and go to Services, you'll see Writing Webinars listed here. Now this has the complete schedule of webinars for this term, and it also has, past those, an alphabetized list of the different webinar recordings we have available, complete with slide decks. So for example, if you wanted to look at literature reviews, we've got, well, writing an integrative review, which is a particular type. We also have intro to lit reviews, a more focused one on writing a literature review for chapter 2 of your dissertation or doctoral project, and various other things here. Now, I also mentioned that we have three different recordings available for intro to grant writing, and they all focus on different things. I believe this one here, we had some people doing some research on religious topics, and so we looked at faith-based research awards in that one. This one, I believe, we had a particular focus mostly on education research, and this one mostly on nursing research. So that's available if that happens to be something that you are especially interested in. So let's go ahead and look at the UCLA database that I mentioned here. So if we just land here at the page, you'll see that they have something that's just for their students, and that's fine, as well as things that are more generally available for anyone to come and look at that. So let's look at this and sort it out. So based on the responses in the chat window, it looks like that most of the people here are in a doctoral program or in a program that will eventually put you into doctoral status. So if I just uncheck this all thing, and let's look at prospective graduate studies. So that there are particular things that are available at that transition point, or starting at that transition point, to go and say, get a master's abroad. But if you're already a graduate student, you're probably interested mostly in these three here: current graduate students, master's research, and doctoral research. So, for example, I have a student who is currently working on research in Korea. Married a Korean man, is looking at ESL pedagogies in that environment. And so they are a pretty good candidate in a year or two for this Korea Foundation Field Research Award. Now, in a year or two, both because they're still finishing their coursework, but also because that deadline happens to be coming up very soon. In fact, that is next week. So if you see something like that and you're like, oh, that would be awesome, but it's coming right up, unless you have everything all prepared, you'll probably want to come back to it next year. So mark your calendar accordingly. We also have people who are looking at more particular things. And I know we have a couple of folks who are looking at technology and education pedagogy, or science curriculums and STEM curriculums, where this particular policy award might be a great opportunity because you get experience working in offices in Washington, D.C., and you also get paid for the experience, which is even better. Now, these ones that we see here are a small selection of those that are available. And if you see, if we scroll down to loading more results, it will keep loading more. The more narrowly you define this, I'm going to scroll back up here, and I'm going to go ahead and narrow this down a bit. Let's go look at education and information services, and let's go ahead and select fellowship or grant. Now, looking at the chat window, I see we have a range of different interests here. And one of the things we want to do is to figure out how other people might classify that in terms of what kind of awards you might be eligible for, because sometimes these cross disciplines and sometimes they cross societies. For example, I see that we have someone in the room who is working in career and technical education and mental health and school counseling. Great. So there are a number of ways that that could potentially factor in here beyond this general heading of education and information services. Counseling being a great example of something that has particular funding opportunities, and it's narrower in the sense of there are particular professional societies that have a more narrow focus than if we were just to be looking at mental health counseling. So there are situations where you would just want to go ahead and start a search in Google. Let's search for school counseling and fellowship. Now, looking at this, you'll see some that are probably not worth your time on it. But, for example, let's go ahead and look at this program here from APA. And yes, that is the same APA that runs APA 7. And so here we're looking at a particular fellowship for working with youth. And we see that, oh, I think they misspelled Abilene here, but that looks like our program is in fact on that list of eligible programs. We will politely not mention that they misspelled our institutional name. All right, now backing up here, looking at this, we see that there's kind of a high noise to signal ratio here. There are a lot of best of things and a couple school specific things. That's not really helpful for us. So I'm going to add in professional society, because what I am really interested in here is finding things like, oh, the American Counseling Association that does have more specific tailored things, so that we're spending less time looking through the 25 best this or that, and more things like, say, the SCECS scholarship here. Or going to the American Counseling Association's webpage and looking here and see, oh, so awards for people working in publishing, that's great, but we're really interested in what could you get that graduate student award for, or what other financial awards might be available. So let's start here. And we see, okay, so based on this, the next deadline is probably going to be in early January 2021. That's great. That's more than 4 months away. That's plenty of time to get letters of recommendation, to write a proposal, to come visit the writing center and everything. And they even get back to people in about 5.5 weeks. So that's good. I've applied for some things where it's 6 months to hear back. This is a good short turnaround time. And we'll see that there are different awards that they have that you can apply for as a master's student or a doctoral student. If you are in training and preparing to make that kind of transition. And so on and so forth. All right, let us back up a little bit and let us go to ACU's pages here. So you should be seeing my web browser here and the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. ORSP is an office that's charged with facilitating certain types of awards. A lot of these are institutional and things that faculty may be applying for, but also some things that are related to students. So if we go to internal grants here, we'll find that there are a variety of awards here, including, for example, undergraduate research grants where you work under faculty supervision. If you happen to be in our bachelor's to DNP program, this is something that you might consider because you'll have 4 years in most people to develop relations with the faculty and say, oh, you're doing the kind of thing I'm interested in. Would you sponsor and supervise a research project that I'm doing? And that's a good way to not only build a strong base of experience and to add some lines to your resume, but also have that foundation to refer to when you are later applying for a doctoral level award. Because if your faculty person can write a letter of recommendation saying, oh, I supervised this project, this person did great, they presented this at the poster at a conference and they were second or third author on a paper, this is all great things for your application because it's showing, oh, you can do this, you have prior experience with things related to what you are proposing. Now, if you look at this here, you can get an idea of what the compensation is. So you can see that this comes in particular ranges. If you're doing a summer, you could, and you are working full-time, or you've got clinicals on the side, don't worry, there is this quarter-time thing where you can still do a substantial research project over the summer. You'd probably pick one that is less time-intensive and more compatible with what you're already doing. Say you're doing clinicals in a rural setting over the summer, you might do some research project that goes hand in hand with that. So while you've driven out there, you can just do your research there and then check back with your faculty member when you're in town. All right, so looking at here, you'll see that we have a variety of other things as well. And some of them may be of more interest depending on your field. I know we have a lot of EDD students who are working on different STEM related things. And seeing here, so while this is going for faculty scholarship, again, often these awards can include working with a student, and that can be a foot in the door. So if you see something that interests you, talk to a faculty person and see if they would be interested in mentoring you in a project. The faculty person would usually be listed as what we call a PI, a principal investigator. And then if you authored any research findings from that, their name would come before yours because they would be the person getting the money. That's fine. It's expected. Someday, if you're doing a lot of research, you will be the PI. But it's a very helpful thing to look at those and things early and have those conversations because you don't know what will turn out. Expect that you'll have to apply for multiple things to get an award for the next year. Now, if we look at the external funding, you'll see that this does refer us to a lot of stuff. Most of this is at a higher level than you'd expect to be working at right now, which is why I have recommended that you go to these institutional databases. Now, I'm going to go ahead and jump back to the slides for a moment because I want to have a link. All right, so we are going to go ahead and look at Duke University's portal here. Now, you'll see that whenever you go to one of these external places, that there'll be some things that do require logins and some that don't. So for example, this Pivot database here, unfortunately, ACU does not have a subscription to Pivot. Sometimes you'll find that your local library does, and so you can log in through them, but ACU doesn't. So we can't go to that particular database. However, we can look at the rest of the things that they have involved and know that a lot of stuff in the mental health area is actually funded through the National Institutes of Health. And more on that later if we have time. So I'm going to go ahead and look in the researchfunding.duke.edu, which despite the name does take us to looking at a lot of things that are available for people at other institutions here. Now, let's go ahead and I'm going to take a topic here, and we'll see how granular we can go here. I'm just going to type in at risk here and see what comes up. Okay, 463 results. That's a lot. And we'll want to narrow that down. And we see just looking at the first couple of results, okay, those are faculty awards. Probably not what we're looking at right now. So let's narrow it down with some of these checkboxes. In fact, let's go ahead and narrow that down to graduate professional students. And so we come up with a much shorter list here. Just searching for at risk gives us 8 results here. So let's take a look at 1 or 2 of these here. Let's go ahead and pick let's go with the visionary grants here. Now, we're not going to worry about that deadline because most of these are annual awards. We're looking ahead to see, is this something that next spring we could be a competitive applicant for this? So looking at this, we see, all right, must be a graduate student or early career researcher. Great. Be affiliated with a nonprofitable, charitable, educational, or scientific institution. Great. ACU qualifies for that. Have demonstrated competence and capacity to execute the proposed work. Well, if you don't have that already, there's time to work on that. Great. So let's see what they're looking for here. They're looking to seed innovation through supporting research, education, and intervention projects. So you don't need to just be observing or teaching people. You could also be trying to change behaviors here. To use psychology to solve social problems in the following priority areas. At-risk vulnerable populations, for example, those with serious mental illness or people who are economically disadvantaged, great. Preventing violence, great. Understanding the connection between behavior and health, understanding and eliminating stigma and prejudice. Now, I don't know about all of your specialties here, but if I look at all the different research that students in the counseling programs, in the EDD program, in the DNP program have brought in through my office door in the last 2 weeks, I can think of at least 8 people whose research fits in this umbrella, which is awesome because it makes it more likely that you or one of your classmates could apply for a project like this. So more details on that, you can go ahead and go to the website there. We're going to go ahead and follow that link here because we want to get an idea of what's involved in that application. So 1-year grants up to $20,000. I mentioned budgets, clear and comprehensive methodology. If you are new to proposing a research project, definitely come and visit the Writing Center and try and make a meeting with one of your faculty professors as well, because there are ways of writing about methodology and conventions that may not be immediately obvious to you. And having other readers who have written and reviewed proposals before is really helpful. Now, note here that they're preferring pilot projects that might be applied to something larger. And again, I know that there are many students here who are looking at doing just that, saying, if this works out, this could be applied across a school district or as part of the larger professional society that they're part of. All right, eligibility, this is good. How to apply? All right, CV 10 pages maximum. Remember when I mentioned put everything in there? Well, this is one of the reasons why. If they're giving you 10 pages, you can include lots of details there. But they're asking for you to write a 5-page project proposal with more or less the same guidelines as our APA course paper template, where you discuss the relevant background, you give a review of the relevant literature, say what you're aiming to do, why it's important, and describe the methods, and if you find something, what the implications of that are. Now, if any of you have started working on your proposal or prospectus or chapter 1, you'll see that this is very much in that vein. So if you find a project now, and you know that your assignments are building up to create components of that proposal, this is a place where you can use a lot of that material as part of your application. You'll want to make sure that it meets their particular formatting, and 5 pages is not a ton of space. So you'll probably have a larger version for your proposal. Well, you'll certainly have a larger version in proposal, but again, it's a lot easier to cut than it is to put things in the first place. So if you are working on something this fall, you could very easily be keeping your notes handy with the idea of, oh, I'm planning on applying for this in April 2021. Now, you can also take a look at past recipients and see what have people done. Are they interested in the kind of things that I am doing? And you'll see, oh, it's not just people who have the doctorate already, it's people who are still working on their doctoral degree or working on their master's degree. And if we were looking through this list, we'll see that it's embracing a variety of things. We have things about STEM and women of color. We've got more public health type things. We have mental health service delivery, suicide risk, intimate partner violence. So if you look at this and you see, they are going for the kind of things that I am interested in, great. So you know that they have an interest in supporting the kinds of things that you're doing. You can also look at this and see, oh, here's a list of people who got this. These are people you could potentially contact and ask for any advice or tips. And I'll tell you from my experience, most people in academia are very giving people. And I've written people and they said, well, here's a copy of my application. Hope it helps. And it's really nice to have that kind of model in front of you. It's like, oh, yes, this is a winning application. Let me read through. Oh, this makes me very excited. I see. Yeah, yes. So use the recipients list as a way of doing research, seeing does what you're doing fit with what they're funding, and can you contact any of these people and ask. I'm giving some lectures for Emory later this fall, so I'm looking at it like, oh, well, that's probably a current student there. I could write them an email because I can find their email in the Emory online directory. So if I wanted to follow up on that, then I have all the ingredients here. And I'd say look back to the last 2 or 3 years. 5 years, 10 years ago, less important, but last 2 or 3 years, yeah, you get a good idea of what kinds of things they're supporting now. There was a general question in the chat window asking about funding for doctoral students. So I'm not sure exactly when that question was asked, but the ACU Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, ORSP, doesn't tend to list resources specifically for doctoral students. There are a number that doctoral students can partner with faculty on, the research awards we were talking about earlier, but more of the doctoral level awards, there's a you go out and get it kind of mentality. So if you are spotting one of these resources that you think might contain your project or part of it, awesome. The faculty are certainly happy to support you on this. Just make sure that you're making your requests sooner rather than later. Let's back up a little bit here. And let's look for something else that came up in the chat window. So retention and attrition for faculty. So that's a especially interesting thing. I can tell you that one of my colleagues at another university is doing a study of retention and attrition for faculty at my alma mater, and that's being funded by the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. And that was something where if you look at it and say, okay, well, what are the reasons that people might leave and stop doing this is because they're getting overworked and they're not happy and etc. Well, you can see how that can very much be related to mental health and sometimes physical as well. So let's go ahead and let's search for attrition. I'm not sure what will come up. That's why we're doing the search. So looking for attrition, you don't see anything, but if you look carefully about what I typed here, you'll see that I actually typed it in incorrectly. So go ahead and check that first. And we'll see, okay, so looking for attrition at, let's see what things we have checked here. This is basically all faculty level awards. So my next question will be, what is your own affiliation? And would that qualify you for this? Or would it be something that you could convince another faculty member to be a PI on? And at this point, I'm going to pause here because the thing I want to talk about next is actually related to one of my slides. So we're going to switch back to PowerPoint here. And I am going to show you a small extract of a successful fellowship application narrative. So this is for the Fulbright faculty program, a project statement that I myself wrote and used to get a Fulbright faculty fellowship to Madagascar. I believe that seeing what works is a great way to learn. And so I'm going to talk through a couple key points here. The first sentence, or the first paragraph, is usually about fixing people's minds. In this case, it's for a teaching and research award at a university in an African country. And one of the first things I want to do is to get them thinking, yes, we would like this person to come here. They're going to do great and won't have any problems. This particular university, all the main classes are taught in English, but most of the students speak French better than they speak English. So I start out and saying, I believe that my extensive experience in teaching and coaching writing for master's and doctoral students will be a great asset to your university. I am fluent in French. I have extensive experience working with non-native English-speaking students, which is most of this university's people, and have prior experience living in that part of the world. And then I talk a little bit about my qualifications that line up with this position. While you may have just a page or two to make your case here, and there was basically a one-page limit here for the project statement, and you can use formatting to help make the point, to make things stand out in ways that if you had more space, you might have a whole section, but here you're really trying to whet people's interest. So I included a couple bullet points. This is for setting up a graduate writing program. So here's an accomplishment that I did with a writing program. That's the first one. They wanted their students to get some coaching on applying for scholarships, grants, and fellowships. So like, here's a number for you. Here's an aggregate of what my students have gotten. And they also wanted their students to get advice on applying for conferences and getting things published. So here's another set of numbers. And then I go into more details. If you have registered for this webinar and or shared your email address with me through the chat, you will get a copy of the slide deck that includes this, so you can look at it later. I've included just the first 2 pages here because that's the normal length for a project statement. And if you're really curious about the rest, you can just ask me and I'll happily share that with you. So usually the purpose of the project statement is to define what you propose to do and lay the basis for your qualifications. They may provide a specific area to include those details, such as I did here, where there's a specific teaching and research details thing, but you want that level of detail to come after you've got them interested and given them a big picture sketch of what you are looking to do. Now we have about 9 minutes left here, so I am going to put out the call for any questions that you might have. And while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to show you some of these other things that are discussed in those earlier recordings of this webinar focused on grants. And I'm going to particularly look at this first link here because this is a large source of education-related funding. And because I've had a couple students get grants in this before. So this is you should now be seeing my web browser. This is the National Center for Education Research, NCER. NCER is one of those large federally funded umbrellas that supervises large research projects. Now, you may be looking at something as if you're working embedded in a school district or in a state department of education, you may be looking to find ways to change things on a large scale and continue this well after your dissertation. And one of my most successful students in grant applications, my favorite was when she won a $1.5 million award and then emailed me apologizing for having to cancel our meeting because she now had one to deal with how they were going to manage the money there. So NCER, most of what they're doing is larger projects that fall into different categories here depending on what you're looking to do within research. For example, innovation or measuring something. If you're trying to see, is the style of leadership effective in this environment where it hasn't really been tested before, great, that would go under measurement. Now, they are one of several centers within the larger IES. So IES is Institute of Education Sciences. They are the umbrella that encompasses these different centers here. So you may find that what you're looking for doesn't fall under what NCER is doing, but you're trying to evaluate, well, we made this change in our district, say, or we made this change in faculty procedures, and we want to see, is this working? Can we expand it? And so this might be a better umbrella for your research. So I'm going to go ahead and see what they have here. Go to projects and programs and see that we have an evaluation studies area here. Now, I see someone has written me with a private question asking about leadership and violence. I'm going to guess that this is school violence, but correct me if that's not the case. So let's go ahead and let's head back to the Duke database here. And let's search for violence first and just see what comes up with that. We get 189 results. That's a lot. We're going to narrow that down now. So I'm going to go ahead and set who's eligible to graduate professional students. And we see that's collapsing it to 10. Great. And you see that those visionary grants that we were looking at earlier show up on the list. Good to know. Let's also go ahead and look at this one here. It's another thing through the American Psychological Foundation. So these particular grants, the Vice Research and Program Innovation grants, seek to seed innovation. Actually, this is very similar wording to the one we were looking at before. All right, let's just head right to their page. And okay, these are all good things to work on. Check the eligibility. All right, same as before. Now this is a small award. So this is $1,000 to seed innovation. So what might you do with $1,000? Well, you might use it to travel to an area, or you might use it to compensate research participants, For example, uh, since it says to seed innovation, I remember one student that I had where they wanted to interview university presidents. And university presidents tend to be busy people, but to make sure that their questionnaire was effective at measuring the things that they wanted, they needed to get a group of 7 to 10 university presidents to take their survey. And so they applied for a similar grant to this. They got around $1,000 in research funding. I think it was $1,200 for that particular opportunity. And then they went and they emailed a bunch of university presidents, and they offered as honorarium for compensation for their time a $100 honorarium. Now, to a university president who is raising millions of dollars, $100 might not seem a lot, but it's the kind of thing that gets people attention. And as an honorarium, it's I think most people consider it an acceptable gesture of, I am not going to waste your time. So that's the kind of thing where if you're trying to get a pool of VIP, very busy people together, you might apply for something like this to either get the travel to go and talk with them in person, if COVID wasn't happening right now, or to offer an honorarium, or to pay a research assistant who would assist in that. I had a student who hired a translator for things because she spoke ASL, American Sign Language, but she wasn't super fluent in it. So she used a seed grant to hire a professional translator to coach her on the stuff she needed and to participate in her preliminary interviews. So look at the numbers. It's always easiest to go after big award when you've gotten some smaller ones. And this is a reasonably concise thing where, the application happens to be 3 weeks away, but let's look and see what's entailed here. It's not a whole lot. Looking at it, it's not to exceed 3 pages. Okay, that's shorter than the 5 one we're looking at. Project timeline, okay, something within a year. Budget and justification, shorter CV, great. So that's something where if you looked at this and said, awesome, I want to go at it, the amount of writing that you have to do, not to exceed 3 pages, plus these breakdowns here, that's something you could absolutely manage. Or if you're thinking, well, I'm just starting this doctoral program, I need to focus on my courses, well, you can always apply for that next year and put it on your calendar, because these deadlines don't float too much. If you put this in your calendar as September 1, 2021, you'd be pretty sure that that would be roundabout there. And even better, put a note in your calendar saying, okay, June 2021, go check to see when the due date is on this. So this concludes our presentation today. We have had a busy hour. Again, if you are interested in any of the other topics that we have covered earlier in previous versions of this workshop, do feel free to go to our webinar archive and look at those other recordings. To briefly talk through these, since I know that there's some people in the room who are doing research in these areas, as then you might be especially interested in some of these more grant-based awards here that you can use for a research project. At the end of the day, whether they call it a fellowship, a grant, or scholarship, I don't think you'll mind. The thing that we all like is, oh, someone is supporting our project and they're doing it with money. So I hope that's helpful. You're more than welcome to bring an application in to the Writing Center. The only thing that I ask is that if you bring an application to us and you get the award, let us know, because that always makes our day. So I will go ahead and I will email a copy of the recording and the slides for this presentation to everyone who has signed up or given me your email address through the chat. Have a great evening, everyone.